Hey, what's up guys? It's Tavis Leaf Glover, and today I wanted to go over just a quick overview of the grid package and how to maximize all the grids that are within it. Whenever you get a package that includes the grids, you'll get an email, but if you don't find the email, check your spam box or your junk folder because sometimes it'll get kicked into there. Within the email, you'll find those download links and you'll begin to download the grids, and there's going to be two different ones. One is the European sizes, so like A4 and larger, and then there's the US sizes. And this is mainly just for printing purposes, so if you plan to print the grids or anything like that, you're going to be printing the appropriate ones. So you don't necessarily have to download both because they're exactly the same except for the print size and the paper size. So just download what you can because the files are pretty big. I'm going to unzip this US grid sizes. And these are just zipped files, and it doesn't take anything special to unzip them. But make sure you do that on your main computer rather than your phone because the files are large, plus some phones require special apps to unzip the folder. So to avoid any problems, just unzip it right on your computer here. So go into the folder and you're going to find all the different grids and PDFs sorted in folders, and we're going to go through these all real pretty quick. First off, I'm going to your PDFs and you can check these out, but there's a few for cinematographers, just talking how you can customize the grids to fit your cinematography. There's more involved articles on how to create compound root rectangles, and this is if you really want to get involved with constructing your own grids and understanding how they're created and how to better use them in complex ways. So that's all for if you want to dig deeper into it, which I recommend because it's interesting to me and it's not as difficult to understand once you start digging into it. This is root rectangles and themes, and this is like a brief overview of the grids and the armature. So click out of here, there's another PDF, and that will deal with once we get into Photoshop. All right, so let's go straight from the top. There's a lot of photographers, a lot of painters, and cinematographers too. So let's just go through these as we see them. So first off is the camera grids. You're gonna see photo and video, and these are basically just sorted with what I thought were more photo grids as opposed to cinematography grids, the longer grids like the Root 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all those are longer, so they're typically used for cinematography, but you can use them for still photos also. So these will all be sized for your LCD. You just got to know which one to pick. So if you have to Google it, just Google, say, Canon. I had someone ask about the Canon 80D, and so I Googled that, and it said it has a 3-inch LCD. So you would go in here. Most of them are a 3-inch, but some of the newer ones are like a little bit larger. So you click in there and you'll see that it has a Photoshop file that you can adjust yourself. Say if you're printing on the transparency film, you can remove some of these if you don't want these grids, and if you go through like the 1.5 more often. I use them frequently and multiple times, but say you lose one every time you shoot, then you can just print up a big sheet of 1.5 rectangles instead of all these other ones. So you can adjust it, or I've got the ones set up for you to print 4 sheets, and that includes all of the grids that I thought were appropriate for photography. And then you can go into the video side and you'll see the 3-inch for video, and this will include your Photoshop file and then your JPEGs also, and these are the longer grids. So say you're shooting a movie on your Canon 6D or whatever, you might want to put this Root 6 grid on there. This one's custom designed, as was mentioned in the Blade Runner PDF, but it's custom designed to have the Root 6 squares, phi measurements, and everything like that. So that one's a really good one to use, this one. And if you're using maybe different aspect ratios, you can use grids that are not as long like these ones, which are the Root 3, This one is root 5. And these all pretty much correlate to the standard ratios that you find within the cinema. So like 21:9 ratio, to figure out the grid that's closest to that one, you just 21 divided by 9 is the 2.333. That's a ratio. So you get a grid that's closest to that, which is the root 5. See, 2.236 is the closest. And then your root 6 that we saw up here, that one's going to be a little bit longer, 2.449. And then you've got the root 9. This is a root 9. It's actually 3 squares long, ratio 3. These are all good for cinematography, but also if you want to use your camera to shoot cinematography or panoramic stills, to get that cinematic look, take a still shot that's long. That's that one. Let's go into the phones because that's closely related to the camera grids. And same thing, photo or video. You'll see all these cameras that were updated to the new grids, and then you'll have older phones that have some of the grids, but not all of them. Like the archived phones, all old phones, they're not going to be updated like the new phones. But you can always drag and drop grids on there and resize it with the Photoshop file. So say you have the iPhone XS and you don't know the screen size or whatever, you can just Google it, or I have it labeled on this one. And same thing, you have the Photoshop file, and then you have the JPEGs that are ready to print. So you can see how large that screen is. So when you're shooting photos on your phone, you're going to have a different screen as when you're shooting video on your phone. So when you're shooting photos, it's going to shrink up and look like this. This is a 4:3 ratio, okay, like a 4/3 camera. This is a 4/3 ratio, but when you go and switch your phone to video, and I'm going to show this on the screen too. So when you go into the video, the iPhone XS, and you switch to video, you're going to see that the screen gets a lot bigger. And that's like a root 3 size. It's a 16:9. That's the ratio, and which is very similar to the root 3, so you can use the root 3 directly on that, and you'll just have this little variance on the end here, which is perfectly fine. With the cinematography grids, you can also use that on your phone, but this is great because with the phone grids, you use that with your drone if you have a drone, and then you're flying your drone and you can see the grid there, and you can then crop down video in post when you're finished. So that's how the grids can be used with your phone, and then cinematography as well. Go back out here. So I'll show you how all these different grid sizes can tie into one kind of ecosystem of creativity. The iPads are the same as the telephones and cameras. You're going to use your iPad as an LCD, and these print just the same. You've got the PSD, and then you've got all these JPEGs you can print. So these are larger, so you're going to see just one grid per sheet, and it'll line up to your iPad pretty nicely. Now the photos, same thing. So they're all there, and they are sorted for what I thought was appropriate for photos, and then the longer ones are appropriate for video, but you can use them however you like. Okay, and we've got the 12-inch, and then there's also older iPads which aren't updated. These are the archived ones that aren't updated for the newer grids, but you can still use this Photoshop file to drag and drop certain ones and resize them as you like. Okay, so we've got those. Let's go into Lightroom. Lightroom, you're going to see several different ones. In each folder, I think it's 239. Okay, so the new grid pack actually had 239 new grids, and then there's one new diagonal gauge, so 240 total, plus some added things as well. But if you add up the total files, it's over like 1,500, I think, because they're all sorted out differently. So in Lightroom, which isn't necessarily my favorite way to analyze photos, but let's go in here. So you can see you've got black horizontal and vertical, and then white horizontal and vertical. So the way you use these in Lightroom is you can go into your view and you want to use your loop overlay and choose layout image, and then you're going to go to wherever you moved your files. So the downloads is where I have the grid package, and then we're going to go to the Lightroom Grids, and then since this photo here is horizontal and it's a little bit darker, I'm going to use a white grid, and I'm going to use the 1.5 MAD white. Some artists or photographers that use this a lot, they'll probably just load up their images and they can cycle through like this and see how their images line up. But when it's vertical like this, so you'll have to use a different grid. And let me see, you can hold the command or control button if you're on a PC, and you'll see these little handles pull up, so you can adjust it that way. Okay, and then move it and just see how stuff lines up. And if you want to turn it off, you just push Command Option O, or you turn it back on. And that's Control Alt O if you're on a PC. So here's the shortcut, loop overlay, show, and then you can hide it. So that's just an easy way to turn it back on. This one, I know it was composed with a phi rectangle, so we can go in, view, and loop overlay. The more you add into here, you'll see recent layout images, and you can start choosing them that way quicker. So let's go into here, and I'm going to use the shortcut, and I'm going to pick the phi grid. So you just go down this list, and the phi MAD, and that's the major area divisions, which is basically the theme of 2, and you'll find the PDF explains that. So choose that, and you'll see how it locks in there. This was actually composed with the grid on my LCD, so it was easy just to snip it down into place, and you could see how things are locking in here. The model's locking in with her leg, this is echoing and locking in there, and then the tree in various different areas are locking in. But do what you can when you're shooting photos. You can't really move much around if it's a tree, so you just gotta position yourself the best you can and then pose the model according to what geometry's in the scene. This one's the 1.5, so we'll see that. Okay, and then this is a cinematography one, which I was talking about, and it's root 6, so I can show you how this one is locking in. So I'm going to open that up, hit the root 6. So this is a cinematography still where I took a photo, but I used the cinematography grid. So root 6, the rebated square, and phi center one. So that's the one I want. You can see the difference there. So that's the one I like for cinematography, and you can see how the tree is locking in there. This is locking in, this is paralleling the branch over there. So let me show you Photoshop. Let me close this out. Typically what I do is I use Photoshop, and I've got all my grids kind of in the sidebar here. If you're on a Mac, I put them just in the sidebar or somewhere quick. I'll use the ones that are in the package. So what we'll do is use the computer grids, because we're analyzing on the computer, and you can create an action, but I found it's just as easy to go through and drag and drop them onto the image. So I'm going to use a white one on this, and I'm going to use the 1.5 MAD. That's the one I used to shoot with. 1.5 MAD, here we go. That's the one, so I'm just going to drag and drop it on there. It's going to drop in as a smart object, which you'll see it kind of looks like this with the path around it, which is fine, but you can rotate it however you want, and if you hold shift, it'll kind of go into increments, and you can turn it exactly 90 degrees. And to expand it, you can stretch it out. You just want to make sure this is locked here, and that's going to keep your proportions correctly. So you can just push it on and off. Okay, if it's off, it's going to go kind of wonky. So I'm going to re-drop it, turn it, and I'm holding shift, and then I'm going to stretch it out from the center. So to do that, you hold Option if you're on the Mac, or Alt if you're on a PC, and see how it's not locked again. So I'm going to Control Z or Command Z, make sure that's locked, and then hold Option or Alt and stretch it out, and it's going to pull from the center. And then I'm going to push OK. And this is where this PDF comes in handy. So this PDF says, once you're in Photoshop, if you're using the black grids, all you have to do is change the layer mode to multiply, and that's going to make the black visible and the white's going to disappear. And if you're using the white grids, you just change it to screen, and that'll make the black disappear. So we've got the white grid, so we want to switch that to screen. So we just go down here and push it to screen, and that's done. And if you want to make this into not a smart object, but a rasterized layer, you go rasterize layer here, and that's just right click, and it doesn't matter if you do that. Just sometimes if you're cropping, you can't really crop smart objects, so you have to convert it to a rasterized layer. So you'll see how she's lined up. I use the grid on my LCD for this, and that's how it's lining up very well. And then you can see her legs locking in. And then in Photoshop, I manipulated this to have coincidences running through these rocks. Okay, I cleaned up the figure ground relationship around her to make her stand out amongst the somewhat busy background. It's not too busy because the contrast is low. To create unity and movement, I created this move down and coinciding with her leg here. So let's look at the other one. It's another one, and I'm going to just drag another grid on there. We're going to go into the computer grids. I'm going to do a black one this time and sort by the name, 1.5 MAD, and turn it holding shift, hold option or alt for the center to stretch it out, and then push OK. And then I'm going to set this to multiply. So there we show her locking in that way. Okay, even the horizon line is locking into the horizontal there, and we're not clipping off her shadow. This is paralleling right here. And this crack is locking into the Baroque diagonal, and her leg and thigh are locking into the sinister diagonal. And you'll find a workflow that works for you, and always try and use the grid when you can. Okay, so let's go back into the computer grids. I'm not a very good digital artist, but I can show you kind of what these can all be used for. And these are basically the high-res ones where you can make your own camera grids or whatever. These are the ones you'd use, and if you want to print them out at different sizes, you can use these as well. I opened up this file, and it's the Root 6 overlapping MAD 60, which means absolutely nothing to anybody that's just learning this stuff. But basically it's just a bunch of Root 6s inside of two mother Root 6s which are overlapping. You've got a PDF that explains somewhat what's going on there, but you don't really need to understand how it's constructed in order to use it. So if you're a digital artist, you can fade this grid and use it as a guide to promote unity, movement, rhythm, and strength. Okay, so you're going to get coincidences if you start locking in things on the same linear path. You're going to get gamut, which is repetition, if you start using similar diagonals. Okay, you're going to get strength from using 90-degree angles, which are everywhere. So unity, movement, rhythm, and strength. And then you also are promoting dominant diagonals, these ones, if you start using dominant diagonals. So I'm going to fade up this drawing that I did. I did this on a light pad actually, but you can see if you're a digital artist, you can use it in the same way. So you just follow the grid and draw your design. And we'll zoom in. But you can see how she's locking in, and the jaguar is locking in. See how it's turning here, locking in, shoulders locking in, the leg. Even the grass, you can curve it up to touch the grid, come around, and then parallel a diagonal. Okay. When you're using the grid in this way, you basically, if you follow it, you don't even have to think about 4 very important techniques that help your composition. Obviously we have nice figure ground relationship because it's a blank background, and we're looking at overlapping shapes and all kinds of other techniques. But if you're just starting out, that's why the grid is so good, because it promotes these important techniques: unity, rhythm, strength, movement, and dominant diagonals. And you can see how easy it is to lock in the grid. All right, now let me look at the diagonal gauges. You'll see, like, if we have We have this one. This one can be printed onto transparency film and used when you're on the scene, shooting a photo or trying to look for diagonals within the scene. Within the Dynamic Symmetry book, I explain how I use this to find the root 9 diagonal within a fallen tree, and then you can stack root 9s and make up the 1.5. Okay, with the diagonal gauges, we've got these, so when you're shooting on scene, and then this advanced one, this one's great for analyzing master paintings. So let's drag that one into a Peter Paul Rubens painting, and this one I'm going to actually enlarge. You can scrub the H or the W and it's going to get bigger, or you can stretch it. So make that a little bit bigger, and I'm going to show you how to set this to screen. And we're looking for a dominant diagonal. This is going to be a quick little example of how you can use the diagonal gauge when you're analyzing. So we've got a slight diagonal here, but this one's definitely dominant, right? We can actually see a triangular enclosure here, which is cool. But let's turn this back on, and we're going to measure this diagonal here, which is in her leg. And we've got root rectangles 1 through 9, and we've got the root phi and the phi in here, so you can line it up and see which one we get. And if you look at the phi, we see her ankle and the foot coincide with this knee, and it goes up to there. That diagonal is a phi diagonal. So there's a lot of different ways that I talk about in the book that you can analyze a painting. If we go with that diagonal and we think it's the phi rectangle that he used in some way, because we do see the exact phi diagonal in her leg, so we'll use the image dimensions, so image size, and then we'll use the calculator and we'll see what we come up with. So we divide the width by the height, so 25.393 divided by 20.593 equals 1.233 is the ratio that we're getting for this specific image, and it looks like it's the entire image. And the way he measured it might have been slightly different because there is a little lip here where there's no painting at all. But we're going to go with this ratio, and if you've been using the grids for a while, you'll know that 1.233 is very close to the phi rectangle that is turned sideways. So it's 2 side by side, so let's line these up and see how it looks. So got this, we're going to change it to screen, move it over to just the edge, see how that looks, and then line it up to this side, and then looks pretty good. Okay, we can see the triangular enclosure kind of, this isn't locking in here, but it's paralleling, and that's an important thing to look at. But you can go through, and if your hunch is that he used this grid to design the painting, then you can go ahead and analyze it further, but you can see how his arm's locking in. And it might be different variations of this same setup, so maybe like smaller phi rectangles within this to help compose things a little bit further. Say he's got more details in this area where the face is, and see if you use the grid to help him organize this area. And he might have used the grid variation differently, but I think overall this ratio of the painting fits 2 phi rectangles side by side very nicely. So that's how you can use these diagonal gauges and the computer grids to analyze master paintings. And let's finish with this on the light table grids. This is my favorite way to use the grids. So these ones, if you're using the US sizes, the printable size is 11 by 17. And the grids were actually sized to fit on a light pad. I'll show a picture of that. It's a Huion LED light pad, LB4. The model is LB4, but you can use any light pad, and I actually just bought a bigger one. That's, I think it's A2 size, which is really huge, and I'll list that one too. And I actually like that one a little bit better, but the only problem is you have to have a constant power source to keep it plugged in. The Huion is battery operated, so you can just charge it and let it go for a while. But these are all sized so you can use the light pad and the grid, and then I'll show a video. I made smaller grids for my own personal use, which are actually smaller than 11 by 17, where I can use 8.5 by 11 sheets to draw on, so I don't have to draw as much, but I can still use the designed method of the grids. Tape your sheet of drawing paper onto the grid that you printed out. I printed out all 239 of them. My goal is to use them all in the same method of drawing, but you tape it on there and use the light pad to illuminate it, and I can see the grid behind it, and then I draw the border and label on the sheet of the drawing paper which grid I used, and then I proceed to just block in the subjects in the scene and refine it from there. But it's definitely my favorite way to use the grids, and I'll be doing videos, more thorough videos on that, but you can get really refined compositions depending on which grids you use. If you use these more complex grids, you can get more refined. If you have a lot of elements within your scene, you can use it to help you organize and compose little smaller details. Or you can use the simple ones if you're just starting out to just practice and go from there. Now that you've seen all the different various grids that come in the package, let me show you how it's all kind of tied together. You can put the grid on your camera, take a photo, compose it with the background, use the diagonal gauge to capture the tree. In this photo, I used the diagonal gauge to find that the branch in the background was a root 2, so then I had the model pose with a good figure ground relationship so I could still see the branch. Had her pose her arm to echo the diagonal of the branch, and then I took the picture. So that was captured using dynamic symmetry. It was cropped in Photoshop to the root 2 size, and then the grid was used to draw the model. So the grid was taped onto the paper, and then I just looked back and forth to lock in the model into the grid and drew her that way, rendered the image, and then I had the drawing enlarged and blown up. I measured it exactly to the canvas that I wanted to blow it up as, and then I used charcoal on the back of the printing, and then I traced in around the enlarged drawing, and then I had lines that I could follow in order to paint. So you can use the grids from start to finish if you're a photographer and painter, that you got the whole ecosystem of how you can use this. Anyway, that's how you can kind of just play back and forth and use it as an extremely powerful tool to promote unity, movement, rhythm, and strength, and then dominant diagonals as well. If you have any questions, leave them below or email me. If you didn't get your package, check your spam box, and if it's not there, you just email me and I'll send you out some temporary links. All right? Thank you so much for the amazing support. You guys are awesome, and I hope you're all staying safe. This is recorded during the big Roni episode, so I hope you guys are all very safe and finding more time to be creative and enjoying life a little bit instead of worrying about things, because maybe by the time you're listening to this, things are back to normal and life is going well. So take care, guys.